This evening we're going to look at three truths about waiting. Waiting is about hope. Waiting is about joy. And waiting is about love. So let's jump right in. Waiting is about hope. Let's turn to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Biblical hope is not wishing for something. This evening, many of you are probably hoping that the Lions are going to win and go to the first Super Bowl ever. But that is not a guarantee, right? That is wishful thinking. That is a hope so. Waiting, biblical waiting, is not a hope so. It is earnest expectation. It is a no so. Jacob, when you asked Megan if the big question, right? When you dropped the big one, you were waiting for her to answer. And I'm guessing that you had gotten to a point in your relationship with Megan where it was not a hope so. You weren't thinking, boy, I hope she says yes. I mean, if not, I'm kind of just kind of, all in kind of thing, right? You kind of figured, I'm guessing, that she was going to say yes, and it was more of a no so, and you were wondering how she was going to say yes or how emotional she was going to be, but you figured she probably was going to say yes, right? So it was an earnest expectation. You kind of knew so what the answer was going to be, and that's how we are in a lot of areas in our life. We know that God is going to step in. We know that He's working, and we're waiting, but we don't know exactly all of the details. Hebrews 11, verse 1, now faith is the substance, there is something there, of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This kind of faith, how can we hope for? How can we know that there's something there when there's nothing there? Logically, that makes no sense, right? That's why it takes faith. This kind of faith only exists when the object of our faith is worthy of the faith placed in it. When the object of faith is worthy of the faith placed in it. I just bought a new truck, a Dodge. I was very hesitant about it because I don't really trust Dodge. There's a reason why when I bought my first truck, it was a Chevy Silverado. So I bought a Dodge. My dad had a Dodge Journey for a lot of years, and I saw a lot of things go wrong with that Dodge Journey. That didn't give me a lot of hope and faith in Dodge. Ethan drove a Dodge Journey for a while, and he had some issues that didn't give me a lot of hope in Dodge, but it worked out to be the truck that the Lord had for me. But if I place all of my faith and hope in Dodge, at some point that truck inevitably is going to disappoint me. If we put all of our faith and our hope for our country and for our Christian lives in the next president of the United States, whoever that might be, we're going to be disappointed, right? If we put all of our faith and hope in the next season for the Green Bay Packers, we're probably more than likely going to be disappointed. But in some more serious things, anything human, from a human standpoint, is going to disappoint us. If we put all of our hope in our strength, at some point, we're going to come up against something that we can't do, we can't accomplish, we can't see through on our own strength, we're going to be disappointed. Or if we put our hope in that nest egg that we have set aside, that retirement, that slush fund, at some point we're going to be disappointed. And you could go right down the line. If you put your faith in your health, boy, health is a fragile thing. The Lord taught me that a couple different times in my life. I'm not old, I'm not even 30 yet, but there was a couple times where this year I had to go into the hospital very reluctantly because I hate the hospital. And they had to hook me up and do a couple tests because I didn't know what was wrong, but I could tell it was something. And that was just kind of a helpless feeling. And you realize very quickly how fragile life is. And God doesn't have to take my life. He just has to stop giving it to me. And if we put our faith and our hope in our own strength or in money or in health, we're going to be disappointed. But faith and hope in Jesus Christ will never lead to disappointment. That is why we can wait on Him with confidence. Hope in Him is certainty. It's not hope. Micah lived in a day, flip over, that's where we're going to go next, Micah. I want you to put your eyes on this passage. Micah lived in a day where there seemed to be no hope. I mean, it was not a good time. And we're going to read through this. Micah chapter 7, the first 6 verses are going to set up a time that really, as we read it, it's going to look a lot like the day and age in which we live in our country and in our world. But we'll notice the end here, that Micah, he wasn't putting his hope in all of the things that were starting to fail and to go wrong in the world. He was putting his faith and his hope in God. Micah chapter 7, verse 1, woe is me. You ever look around, or those of you who watch the news? I can't, because it just starts out my day depressed. If those of you who watch the news, you might say that, woe is me. Good grief, what's going on? Woe is me, for I am as when they have gathered the summer fruits, and as the grapelings of the vintage, there is no cluster to eat. My soul desired the first ripe fruit. The good man is perished out of the earth, and there is none upright among men. Does that sound like today in which we live? They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net, that they may do evil with both hands earnestly. The prince asketh, and the judge asketh for a reward, and the great man, he uttereth his mischievous desire. So they wrap it up. The best of them is as a briar. The most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. The day of the watchman and the visitation cometh. Now shall there be their perplexity. Trust ye not in a friend. Put ye not confidence in a guide. Keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. For the son dishonoreth the father. One of the closest relationships that there should be, a father and a son. Mike is saying, well, you can't trust anybody. You can't trust your son. You can't trust your father. The daughter riseth up against her mother. The daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. That's a little bit more believable. A man's enemies are in the men of his own house. Notice this. After all that, Micah said, you look around and you're just, the best of men are wicked. We can't trust anyone. You can't look anywhere and be confident that there's going to be a good outcome. Therefore, I will look unto the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. Notice this last phrase, my God will hear me. He understood that the only hope that he had was to wait on God during a tumultuous time. That rings true today. There may be times that seem so dark that we cannot see how there could be any hope. Yet, the very basis of our salvation is waiting in hope of something that we cannot see. There's times where we can kind of see what God is doing in our life, and it's easy to have faith and have hope when we can see light at the end of the tunnel, right? As someone said in jest, sometimes don't put too much hope in the light at the end of the tunnel because it could be a train, right? But it's easy to be hopeful when you can see, you know what, this is difficulty, I'm really ill, there's some, a difficult time going, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to pass. But it's more difficult when you look around and there is no hope, there is no light. You have no idea how long it's going to be, what God's trying to teach you, what the outcome is going to be. But our salvation is waiting for something that we don't know when it's going to come to fruition, and we don't know, we can't see it. Can you put your hands on your salvation? No, but yet that's the most important thing that we build our lives upon. Turn to Romans chapter 8, verse 24. This is a couple of verses that come right before the verse that we love to quote, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. But notice what we're called to do before all of those things work together for good. Notice what happens here. Romans chapter 8, verse 24, for we are saved by hope. But hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. The very foundation of our Christian life, our salvation. You say, I don't know what God is going to do in my life or what he's doing now, but I know this, I'm saved. Well, do you know that? It takes faith to believe that we're saved, and it's something that we can't see. So the very basis that we know that we're saved is based in hope. And that same hope, that same confidence that we have that Jesus Christ died for us, he rose for us, he sealed us, he's coming for us, we're going to heaven when we die. We can have the same confidence that while we're in a difficult time, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, we don't know what God is doing, we can have the confidence that, a couple verses down, he's working all things for our good. As long as God is in control, there's hope. So, what is waiting on God about? It's a hope. Number 2, waiting is about joy. Often waiting does not feel joyous. I hate to use you as an example again, Jacob, but has the last 6 months or so waiting to get married, Megan, has it been does it seem super exciting waiting for that big day? Not really, right? It's going to seem way more exciting on the day and then afterwards, right? Waiting does not always seem fun. Abby is waiting for something pretty big right now. And the waiting is not as fun as, well, the day that it arrives is definitely not fun, but then afterwards it should get better because you're waiting for something that's going to be great. But the waiting isn't always fun. It's not joyous. It doesn't always feel joyous, but we have learned that waiting on and for God is part of the Christian life. It's something that God has asked us to do. We know it's something that's going to happen. So if God has asked me to wait, He's commanded me to wait, we know we're going to wait, but then He also has commanded that we live a joyful life, and He has said, I have given you a joyful life. What did Jesus say in John 10:10? The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy, but I am come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. So we're not just supposed to be muddling through the Christian life, just, well, how's it going today, brother? Well, I'm just walking around to save funeral expenses. That's not the life that God has given us to live. We're supposed to live a joyful life. But if a lot of that life is spent waiting on God, then that means we have to have joy in the waiting. How is that possible? Joy in waiting in the Lord is not a state in which we try to pretend that trials are easy to bear, or that life's challenges have gone on vacation, or that followers of Christ only experience positive emotions. I was chatting to Adam about this. I said, Adam, do you think that he was talking about Amanda's pregnancy. And boy, Amanda, she's been really sick. She's been really nauseous and this and that and the other. I said, our wives are pregnant right now together, right? Do you think that Miss Kara doesn't go through those same things? Do you think that she doesn't get sick? That she doesn't get nauseated? That she doesn't get every woman that goes through pregnancy, they all go through those difficulties. But I said, just because we're saved, you don't get an immunity to that. Right? And I think sometimes new believers, they get disappointed because they find out that the Christian life is a whole lot like just normal life, right? Because we're not above our human bodies. But so joy is not the absence of trials, it's our perspective in the trials, right? Rather, the believer who has learned to wait biblically has learned that God's character matters more than all of those things. Matters more than the difficulties, than the trials, than the ditch that we get stuck in that Pastor referred to. Much more than that, we can consider or reckon our difficulties as actual reasons to rejoice. How is that possible? We talked about it a lot when we were talking about giving thanks. And we posed some different situations where the knee-jerk reaction is to grumble, right? The car breaks down. Great, that's exactly what I need. I'm glad I have to pay hundreds of dollars to fix this piece of junk car so I can get to work. That's our initial grumble. Rather than, Lord, thank you that I have a job to go to. Thank you that I have a vehicle that needs fixing, that I don't have to walk to work every day. For those of the ladies, we're using that example. Lord, thank you that I am pregnant. And even though the nausea and the vomiting and all of that is not fun, Lord, we prayed to be able to have a child. Thank you that we have another one on the way. We can have a negative response in the trial, or we can look at the trial through God's eyes and have a reason to rejoice. But that's something that we shouldn't fake or, fake it till you make it. What a terrible statement. That should not be the case. We should truly be joyful in the difficulty. A proper response to troubles leads to perseverance, which leads to mature faith. A proper response to troubles leads to perseverance, which leads to mature faith. You say, I don't believe that. James chapter 1, verse 2. Turn there. That's the next spot we're going. James chapter 1, verse 2. Many of you already know what verse this is. We're talking about waiting for God. I graduated from college. Now what? God, I don't know. I thought I was going to be married to the Incredible Hulk by now. I thought I was going to have just a complete direction here at this point. but I haven't met the one yet. I don't know what the next step is, God. Now I'm waiting for you. Now what? Waiting for God is about hope. It's about joy. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptations. That word divers there is talking about uncertain derivation. We don't know where the trial is coming from. We don't know if it's something that God has allowed into our life to teach us something. We don't know if it's Satan putting something into our life to try to trip us up. We don't know if it's just a natural flow of life. Divers temptations. And temptation is simply talking about the things that happen to our life. It's not just a temptation of Satan saying, Jack, do this. This is wrong. Do this. That's not just what a temptation. The Bible talks about Jesus being tempted in all points like we are, yet without sin. Yes, Satan tempted him to do wrong, but the temptations also that Jesus faced was just the fact that he was a human living in an imperfect world. He suffered things beyond just opportunities to sin. Jesus, think about this. John was at the foot of the cross. And one of the last things that he said to John was, would you take care of my mother? Well, why would he have to ask someone else to take care of his mother? Because likely his father, his earthly father, Joseph, passed away. That was a temptation that Jesus endured, the loss of a parent. So Jesus lived life. He suffered all type of different diverse temptations, yet he had joy. What did he say as he went to the cross? Something that was not joyous. He was doing it for the joy that was set before him. Knowing this, verse 3, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect. That's talking about complete, mature, and entire, wanting nothing. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptation. This process draws us closer to the Father and makes us more like the Son. Isn't that what we're trying to do as a believer? To draw closer to God and be more like His Son? But oftentimes the thing that draws us the closest to God and makes us more like the Son is not blessing. Is not the easy time. Is not the mountaintop. It's the valley. It's the dark time. It's the uncertainty. It's the difficulty. It's the trial. It's the waiting. Therefore, adversity, while painful on one level, should, on a deeper level, be considered a reason for joy. I'm going to read this. When troubles come, we often pray for relief instead of faith, wisdom, and steadfastness. You're broke. You don't have any reserve in the bank. Your car breaks down. And you say, Lord, thank you. That's usually not our first response, right? You say, Lord, please fix this. Please help me to get this going for no cost. When trouble comes, when you get the phone call that the child is sick, we don't know what it is. We need to go in for further testing. You get the call that mom passed away. All right, now, what is our first response? Is it to pray for faith and wisdom and joy? When troubles come, we often pray for relief instead of faith, wisdom, and steadfastness. But if God were to grant such prayer requests quickly every time, He'd be removing from our lives the very factors that lead to growth and maturity. He'd be removing those things that push us in the direction closer to faith and dependence on Him, and the things that are conforming us and transforming us towards Christ-likeness. The principle of joy in waiting is beautifully summarized by this man in the New Testament, Simeon. Turn to Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, very commonly known as the Christmas story. Simeon got a promise from God that he was one day going to see the Messiah, the Christ child. But he did some waiting. Luke chapter 2, verse 25, and behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. The same man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel. The consolation of Israel, of course, is talking about the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And the Holy Ghost was upon him. And it was revealed unto him by the Holy Ghost that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. And he came by the Spirit into the temple. It's so important to be Holy Spirit led. Who led Simeon into the temple? to see Jesus. The one day when Jesus was going in to be following after the custom of the Jews, of course, Jesus to be circumcised. It was the one day he was going to be there. Who led him there to be there when Jesus was going to be there? The Holy Spirit. And he came by the Spirit into the temple when the parents brought the child Jesus to do for him after the custom of the law. Then took he him up in his arms and blessed God and said, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all Israel, a light to lighten the Gentiles, and the glory of thy people. Simeon waited a long time, but he finally got to see and hold the promise that was made to him, that he would be able to see the consolation of Israel, the Messiah, Jesus Christ in the flesh. Do you think he was glad that he waited? Do you think he was glad he was Spirit-filled while he waited? Can you imagine the joy of holding Jesus Christ in your arms, the salvation of Israel? Waiting is about joy. It probably wasn't always fun while he was waiting. He probably had to do some undesirable things while he was waiting. He probably got tired of waiting and maybe even wondered, am I cracked? Was that really a promise from God, or am I just dreaming things up? Am I actually going to see Jesus before I die? It's been a long time. But the joy of holding the little one, the joy of Caleb going into the promised land that the Lord had promised him after 45 years, that was worth the wait. Waiting is about joy. Psalm 33, verse 12, Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. Verse 20, Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our help and our shield, for our hearts shall, get this, rejoice in him. Waiting on God, waiting for God is about joy. And lastly, it's about hope. It's about joy, and it's about love. To love God is the greatest commandment that's ever been given. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And Jesus confirmed it in quoting this law in Deuteronomy in Matthew 22, verse 37. Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. Verse 38, For this is the first and great commandment. It's easy to love God when things are going well, isn't it? When the blessings are flowing, when life is seemingly going as it should. It's more difficult to love God through a season of waiting, difficulty, trial, loss, or diverse temptations. Yet love for God is commanded and essential in both times, in all instances. True love for the Lord is honest and courageous enough to love him while continuing to see and lament over pain and suffering in all its manifold forms. Because he loves us, and because we love him, we can take our doubts while we're waiting, our questions, our pain, our sufferings. We can take them to him because of who he is. He's sovereign over all. He is the only one who can help us. He is perfectly wise and loving. We have to remember also, though, that God, he's not a vending machine that fulfills our plans. We walk up and say, Oh, God, I'm going to need a little bit more money today. Let's see. I'm going to put in a prayer, A1, thank you. All right, I needed some. I got $1,000 to help pay the bill. God isn't a vending machine to help with what we need. Sometimes he makes us wait. Sometimes he makes us not know where that's going to come from. These things can hurt, waiting for something that we don't understand. But in order to preserve a relationship with God, it requires faith and love without measure. That does not require a sign or a gift. Do you know that God doesn't owe you an explanation? God doesn't owe, Jacob, I'm going to do some things in your life. And you say, why? God says, just trust me. You say, but I need to see. God says, just trust me. Lamentations, last place we'll turn. Lamentations chapter 3. Lamentations chapter 3, and we're going to wrap this up. Waiting is about love. Talking about loving God while we're waiting. Sometimes it's difficult to love God, to not, as Pastor mentioned this morning, sometimes He was angry with the Lord. The Lord was doing some things in his life that he didn't understand, doing some things in the lives of those that he loved, his children. You mess with a mom all you want, but don't mess with her children, right? You start messing with the kids, now we got a problem, right? Lamentations 3:19, remembering mine affliction and my misery, the wormwood and the gall. My soul hath them still in remembrance, and is humbled in me. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because of his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul, therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. The salvation of the Lord, first and foremost, of course, is talking about our salvation, but also saving us from whatever difficulty we're in. Mrs. Witter and I were just talking about this. Everybody has a trial, and everybody's trial is big to them, right? We look at a little child, and maybe the biggest trial that they have in the day is that they wanted to eat pizza rolls, and mom gave them chicken nuggets. But to them, that was a big deal. They really loved pizza rolls. And you look at it and you think, that's so dumb. But that was a trial to them. We look around at young people and we think, the biggest thing I had to worry about was paying that bill. Or, as a teenager, the biggest thing I had to worry about was this and such. That's not a big deal. But to them, that's a big deal. Because your trials to you are a big deal, aren't they? And other people's trials are a big deal to them. And the Lord is willing to save us all out of our trials. Because here's the thing. Aren't all of our trials not that big of a deal compared to God? You think God can take care of all of those things? But he allows some things into our life not to hurt us, not to harm us, but to draw us closer to him, to grow us, to deepen our faith, to make us more like his Son. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. When we're waiting, we're moving forward. We said a lie about waiting is that we're doing nothing, that we're just stale and stagnant. That's not true. When we're waiting, we're moving forward, because only he can do what we're waiting for, and only he is worthy of waiting on. Are you waiting for God, and are you waiting on God with hope, with joy, and with love?